The emergency sirens wailed across Luna Station as Commander Lee Hyun rushed through the corridors. His boots echoed against metal floors, while red warning lights flashed overhead. Something terrible was happening, and every instinct told him. This was different from the usual border conflicts or pirate raids. The main council chamber buzzed with panic when he arrived. Holographic displays showed star maps with large red zones spreading like infection across the galaxy's outer rim. Ambassador Yoon-ji from the frontier colonies stood at the central podium, her face pale with fear. "The Zarian system is gone," she announced to the stunned audience. "Not destroyed, gone, as if it never existed." Dr. Park Min, humanity's top scientist, stepped forward with his tablet showing impossible readings. 3 star systems have vanished in the past month. The energy signature suggests something that defies our understanding of physics. Lee Hyun felt his stomach drop. He had seen wars, natural disasters, even solar flares that wiped out entire planets, but stars didn't just disappear. What could do that? An alien delegate from the insectoid hive queens clicked her mandibles nervously. Ancient records speak of the void swarm, a living darkness that devours reality itself. We thought it was legend. The crystalline resonant ambassador chimed in with harmonious tones that translated to dread. Our oldest archives mention the same entity. It consumed civilizations before your species learned to make fire. Then it vanished for thousands of years. Park Min activated another hologram, showing the advancing destruction. Whatever it is, it's moving toward inhabited space at incredible speed. The pattern suggests it's not random destruction, but purposeful consumption. "How long do we have?" Lee asked, though he dreaded the answer. "At current velocity, 18 months, until it reaches Earth," Park replied grimly. The chamber erupted in chaos. Alien ambassadors began speaking frantically in their native languages, while human officials shouted questions and demands. Through the noise, Lee heard the Kefter military commander reporting that their legendary defensive arrays had held for only 6 hours before being consumed. The energy beings called the Luminari were extinguished in minutes, added the resonant. Even the ancient architects, who built cities around entire stars, couldn't stop it. Captain Kim Dao entered the chamber with fresh intelligence reports. Long-range scouts confirm the pattern. Every system in its path shows the same result. Complete erasure. No debris, no radiation, nothing. Just empty space where stars and planets used to be. Ambassador Yoonji's voice cracked as she continued her report. The Hive Queens are evacuating their entire civilization to the Magellanic Clouds. The resonants are fleeing to distant galaxies. Everyone with faster-than-light capability is running. What about the species that can't flee fast enough? Lee asked. Silence filled the chamber. The answer was obvious and terrible. Dr. Parkman brought up tactical displays showing evacuation routes. Most alien civilizations are abandoning this galaxy entirely. They're treating us as acceptable losses, a buffer to buy them time to escape. Acceptable losses, Lee repeated bitterly. How generous of them. The Kefter commander, a massive being covered in natural armor plating, spoke with defeat in his electronic voice. "Commander Lee, you must understand. This entity consumed my people's greatest fortifications. We built weapons that could crack moons, shields that could withstand supernovas. None of it mattered. The Void Swarm doesn't fight civilizations. It erases them." Young engineer Song Woo raised his hand from the technical section. "Sir, what exactly are we dealing with? Is it a weapon, a natural phenomenon, some kind of living creature?" Park Min shook his head. "Our best theory is that it's something beyond our current understanding. It seems to feed on the fundamental forces that hold reality together. When it passes through a system, space itself becomes unstable." Captain Kim stood up. "So, what are our options? Run like everyone else. With what ships?" demanded General Cho Wan. "We have the largest human fleet in history, But we can't evacuate 40 billion people in 18 months. Most of our colony ships are still under construction. The weight of impossible mathematics settled over the room. Even if every human ship worked perfectly, even if they found planets willing to accept refugees, the numbers didn't work. Most of humanity would be left behind when the void swarm arrived. Li Haiyan watched the tactical displays showing evacuation projections. Red numbers indicated populations that couldn't be saved. The outer colonies would be abandoned first, then the industrial worlds, then the core systems. In the end, maybe 10% of humanity might escape to uncertain futures in distant galaxies. There has to be another way, he said quietly. The resonant ambassador's crystalline form flickered, with sad harmonics. Commander, your species is young and brave, but this is not an enemy that can be fought with courage or cleverness. The wise choice is to save who you can. As the emergency session continued, deep into the night, Li found himself staring at Earth on the central display. 40 billion human souls, countless cultures, centuries of art and science and dreams, all scheduled for erasure in less than 2 years. While alien delegates discussed evacuation logistics and resource allocation, something stubborn stirred in Li's chest. Humanity had never been good at accepting impossible situations quietly. Maybe it was time to prove that to the galaxy. 3 weeks after the emergency session, Dr. Parkman stood in his laboratory staring at equations that shouldn't work. Coffee cups and food containers covered every surface while holographic calculations floated around him like glowing ghosts. He hadn't slept properly since learning about the void swarm, and his breakthrough came at 4 in the morning, when exhaustion finally cracked his logical thinking. Stars, he whispered to himself. We've been thinking too small. The next day, Parkman called an urgent meeting with Commander Li Haiyan. Instead of evacuation charts, his presentation showed massive ring-like structures surrounding distant suns. Project Prometheus, Park announced to the small gathering of military leaders and engineers. We don't run from the void swarm, we turn stars into weapons. General Cho Wan leaned forward in his chair. Explain that again, Doctor. Park activated a hologram showing a normal star, then added the ring structure around it. The swarm feeds on reality itself, but our analysis shows it struggles with pure stellar energy released in specific patterns. We build arrays around selected stars and turn them into controlled supernovas. Engineer Song Woo studied the technical specifications floating in the air. The energy requirements alone would be impossible, and the construction timeline, 12 arrays. Park continued, ignoring the objections. Positioned along the swarm's approach vector, each one turns a star into a precisely aimed energy weapon that fires wavelengths the swarm can't easily absorb. Captain Kim Dao stood up abruptly. You're talking about blowing up stars. On purpose. Controlled stellar detonation, Park corrected. Like setting controlled fires to stop a forest fire from spreading. We sacrifice these systems to save everything behind them. Li Haiyan examined the tactical projections. The plan required building massive construction platforms, mining entire asteroid belts, and coordinating the largest engineering project in human history, all while racing against an 18-month deadline. How many people would we need? Li asked. Song Woo ran quick calculations on his tablet. Every available engineer, miner, construction worker, and transport pilot in human space, plus volunteers for the most dangerous assignments. Speaking of dangerous, added Captain Kim grimly, whoever operates these arrays when they fire won't survive the stellar explosion. We're asking people to commit suicide for a plan that might not work. The room fell silent. Parkman's equations were elegant, and his theory sound, but the human cost would be enormous. Entire construction fleets would die building the arrays. Technical crews would perish, maintaining them, and the final operators would burn with the stars they weaponized. General Cho pulled up casualty projections on his display. Conservative estimates show we'd lose 200,000 personnel minimum, probably more, compared to 40 billion. If we do nothing, Lee replied quietly. Over the following days, word of Project Prometheus spread through human space like wildfire. The reaction surprised everyone. Instead of panic or demands for evacuation, volunteers began signing up faster than the military could process applications. Transport pilot Jung-ae was among the first to volunteer, even knowing her job meant flying construction materials into systems marked for destruction. "My kids are on Earth," she told the recruitment officer. "If this crazy plan saves them, I'll fly supplies to hell itself." Asteroid miner Kang Ho left his comfortable job in the inner systems to join the deep space mining crews. "Someone has to strip those asteroids bare," he said simply. "Might as well be people who know how to work in dangerous places." Meanwhile, alien observers watched humanity's response with amazement and confusion. The logical Nexari calculated the plan's success probability at 0.003% and couldn't understand why humans pursued such hopeless odds. The Kethter military advisors called it beautiful madness, but admitted they respected the audacity. "Your species fascinates us," transmitted the resonant ambassador from her evacuation ship. "Every rational analysis suggests you should flee, yet you choose to fight the unfable." Dr. Park Min barely heard the alien commentary. He worked 8-hour days refining the array designs while shipyard supervisor Han Sol pushed his workers around the clock. The Luna shipyards that normally built one major vessel per month now had to produce 12 massive construction platforms in 6 months. Captain Kim Dao took command of the first construction fleet, knowing he probably wouldn't return. His crews included volunteers from every human colony, people who left behind families and comfortable lives to build weapons from stars. "The engineering challenges are insane," reported Chief Engineer Lim Tae during a progress briefing. "We're essentially building cities in space, then positioning them close enough to stars to control stellar fusion. The heat shielding alone requires materials we've never worked with before." But slowly, impossibly, the project began taking shape. Mining crews like Kang Ho's team stripped entire asteroid belts, sending raw materials to construction sites where Han Sol's workers assembled components larger than most space stations. Transport pilots like Jung-a ferried supplies on increasingly dangerous runs as the arrays neared completion. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity poured its entire civilization's resources into 12 massive rings of metal and technology. Other species had fled when faced with the void swarm. Humanity was building a trap. "They're actually doing it," observed the Hive Queen ambassador from her evacuation fleet. "The mad little mammals are weaponizing stellar physics." With 4 months remaining until the swarm's arrival, the first array neared completion around a red giant star designated Target Alpha. Captain Kim transmitted regular updates as his construction crews worked in the star's deadly radiation. Humanity had committed everything to this impossible gamble. Soon they would learn if courage and determination could overcome cosmic horror. The first stellar array hung like a massive metal ring around the red giant star, its surface gleaming with thousands of control nodes and energy collectors. Captain Kim Dao stood on the command deck of his construction ship, watching his crews make final adjustments to the weapon that would either save humanity or become their expensive tombstone. "Array 1 is online," reported Engineer Lim Tae from the central control station. All systems showing green across the board. Through the reinforced windows, Kim could see the void swarm approaching like a dark storm made of twisted space itself. Reality seemed to bend and writhe where it touched normal space, making his eyes water when he looked directly at it. The thing had already consumed 2 more star systems since construction began, leaving nothing but empty blackness behind. "Distance to target?" Kim asked his navigation officer. 12 hours until it reaches our perimeter," came the reply. "All non-essential personnel have been evacuated to minimum safe distance." Kim nodded, though they all knew there was no truly safe distance from what was coming. The volunteers who stayed behind to operate the array had made their peace with death weeks ago. Transport pilot Jung-A had delivered the last supply run yesterday, refusing evacuation orders to stay with the array crew. "If this works, I want to see it," she had told Kim firmly. "If it doesn't work, I don't want to live with the guilt of running away." Dr. Parkman's voice crackled over the communication system from the command center on Luna. "Array 1, we're tracking the swarm's approach. Remember, you need to wait until it's fully committed to consuming the star before firing. If you trigger too early, it might retreat and find another path to Earth." "Understood," Dr. Kim replied. "We'll hold our fire until the last possible moment." The waiting was the hardest part. Kim watched his crew of 200 volunteers check and recheck their equipment. These were good people, miners like Kang Ho who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment, engineers like Song Woo who understood the technical challenges better than anyone, pilots like Jung-A who refused to abandon their posts. 8 hours later, the void swarm reached the outer edges of the star system. Space itself seemed to scream as the entity began its feeding process. The star's light flickered and dimmed as something impossible started draining its energy. "It's working," whispered Navigation Officer Park Soo. "The swarm is focusing all its attention on consuming the star. It doesn't seem to notice our array." Kim felt sweat running down his face despite the ship's climate control. "Engineering, what's our status?" "Array charging at 90%, reported Lim Tae. "Stellar manipulation fields are stable. We're ready to turn this sun into the biggest bomb in human history." The void swarm pulsed with hunger as it fed on the star's core. Reality twisted around it like broken glass, and Kim could see other dimensions bleeding through the cracks. Whatever this thing was, it existed partially outside normal space-time. "Fire when ready," Kim commanded. The stellar array activated with a sound like the universe tearing apart. Massive energy beams lanced into the star's core, destabilizing the fusion reactions that had burned steadily for billions of years. The red giant began to collapse, then exploded outward in a controlled supernova that released more energy in 10 seconds than most civilizations used in their entire history. The explosion was magnificent and terrible. The void swarm, caught in the middle of feeding, suddenly found itself drowning in pure stellar fire, calibrated to frequencies it couldn't easily absorb. For the first time in recorded history, the ancient entity recoiled in what might have been pain or surprise. "It's working," shouted Jung-A over the communication system. "The swarm is pulling back from the blast wave." But their celebration was brief. Even as Kim's construction ship was vaporized by the stellar explosion, long-range sensors picked up troubling data. The void swarm had been hurt, but not destroyed, and it was already adapting. Dr. Parkman watched from Luna as arrays 2 and 3 fired in sequence over the following weeks. Each explosion was perfectly timed and positioned, creating a wall of stellar fire along the swarm's approach route. But the effectiveness decreased with each detonation. "It's learning," Park announced grimly to the emergency command center. "The swarm analyzes each attack and develops countermeasures. Array 4 only slowed it down for 6 hours instead of 2 days. General Cho Wan studied the tactical displays, showing the entity's continued advance. "How many arrays do we have?" "Left 8, replied Admiral Lee Hayen, who had taken overall command after Kim's sacrifice. "But if the current trend continues, they'll be useless by the time we reach Array 7. Engineer Song Woo, now coordinating the remaining arrays from a safe distance, transmitted his analysis. "The swarm is developing what looks like energy absorption techniques. It's turning our own weapon into food." The next 3 arrays fired with increasingly poor results. Array 5 slowed the swarm for 4 hours. Array 6 managed only 90 minutes. By the time Array 7 exploded its star, The void swarm barely paused in its advance toward Earth. Dr. Parkman stared at his calculations with exhausted eyes. Months of work, thousands of lives, and humanity's greatest engineering achievement were failing. The swarm continued its inexorable approach. Now only 8 months from Earth, and growing stronger with each stellar explosion it survived. "We need a new plan," he told Li Haiyan during their emergency meeting. "Something the swarm can't adapt to because it's too big and too fast." Li studied the star charts, showing their remaining resources. "What do you have in mind, Dr. Parks?" Voice was heavy with the weight of terrible necessity. "Final protocol. We detonate every star in a 50 light-year radius simultaneously. Create a wall of fire so vast and sudden that even the swarm can't adapt fast enough. The cost would be unimaginable: 50 human star systems, and millions of colonists who couldn't be evacuated in time." The voting terminals across hundreds of human worlds glowed with the same terrible question. Should humanity sacrifice 50 star systems to stop the void swarm? Admiral Li Hyun watched the results stream in from his command center on Luna, each vote representing someone's decision about their own possible death. On the agricultural world of New Jeju, Farmer Bae-soo stood in his wheat fields under the alien sunset. His farm lay directly in the blast radius of final protocol. His wife and children had already been evacuated, but someone had to maintain the food production until the last moment. He pressed the yes button on his voting device and went back to harvesting crops that might feed refugees tomorrow. Miner Kong Ho floated in his asteroid mining suit, working to extract the last precious metals from rocks that would soon be vaporized. His family couldn't get evacuation passage: too many people, too few ships. He voted yes anyway, and sent a message to Earth. "Tell my kids their dad helped save the galaxy." On the frontier colony of Haven's Rest, teacher Moon Da gathered her students around the classroom display. Most were already evacuated, but a few dozen children remained whose parents worked essential jobs. "We're going to write letters to Earth," she told them gently, "to let people know we chose this." She voted yes while her students drew pictures of stars and spaceships for children they would never meet. The results came in slowly, as each world reported. The core systems voted overwhelmingly for final protocol, easy choices when your planet wasn't in the blast zone. But the frontier worlds, the ones that would burn, voted yes by even larger margins. 73% on New Jeju, 81% on Haven's Rest, 94% on the mining stations that had no hope of evacuation. Dr. Parkman watched the numbers with tears in his eyes. "They're voting to die to save people they've never met," he whispered to his assistant. The final count showed 67% in favor of final protocol. Humanity had chosen to burn down their own neighborhood to save their species. Admiral Li Haiyan began the largest military operation in human history. 50 stellar arrays had to be positioned and synchronized across a volume of space larger than most alien empires. The timing had to be perfect. Even a few seconds of delay would let the void swarm adapt to the attack. Array Supervisor Lim Tae coordinated the technical details from Array Control 7, knowing his station would be destroyed in the firing sequence. "All arrays report ready for synchronized detonation," he transmitted to Lee. "We'll maintain position until the stellar fires consume us." On evacuation ship Mercy's flight, pilot Seo Jun made her final run into the danger zone. Her cargo hold was packed with children from Haven's Rest, including teacher Moon Da's students. "This is the last transport," she radioed to the evacuation coordinators. "I'm staying behind to help coordinate the final phase." The void swarm continued its advance, now only months from Earth. It had grown stronger by feeding on the previous stellar explosions, its dark form twisted with new capabilities. Reality bent around it like broken mirrors, showing glimpses of the consumed civilizations trapped within its structure. Admiral Lee opened communication channels to all 50 doomed systems. Thousands of volunteers had stayed behind to maintain the arrays until the final moment. Colonial Volunteer Oben worked alone on Array 12, his evacuation ship having left 3 days ago. Array 12 is locked and loaded, he reported cheerfully. See you on the other side, Admiral. The synchronization sequence began. Each array had to fire within a 3-second window to create the wall of stellar fire that could stop the swarm. Lee watched as confirmation signals arrived from across the blast zone. Green lights appeared on his tactical display as each array reported ready status. Final protocol is authorized, Lee announced to the galaxy. All arrays, prepare for simultaneous detonation in 60 seconds. The alien observation fleets, watching from safe distances, recorded what happened next. 50 stars, across a vast region of space, exploded at almost the same moment. The night sky became day across hundreds of worlds, as humanity's greatest sacrifice created a wall of fire that stretched across multiple star systems. The explosions were perfectly timed and positioned. Each stellar detonation released energy, calibrated to disrupt the void swarm's reality-bending abilities. But the real power came from the scale. 50 supernovas creating a continuous barrier of stellar plasma and exotic radiation. On New Jeju Farmer Bay, Sue watched his son explode, with quiet dignity. On Array Control 7, Lim Tae transmitted his final report. All systems nominal. It's been an honor serving with you all. Teacher Moon Da held her remaining students as their world was consumed by stellar fire, telling them stories about heroes until the very end. The Void Swarm, approaching the wall of fire at incredible speed, tried to adapt as it had before, but the scale was too vast and the timing too precise. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient entity found itself facing something it couldn't immediately overcome. The creature that had devoured entire civilizations slammed into humanity's wall of stellar fire and stopped, caught in continuous explosions across multiple dimensions, unable to adapt fast enough to the coordinated attack. The Void Swarm began to retreat toward the galaxy's edge. Humanity had won. The cost was 50 star systems, millions of dead, and the destruction of their entire outer civilization. But they had won. 5 years after the Great Burning, Dr. Parkman stood on the observation deck of New Sol Station, watching construction ships build humanity's newest achievement. His hair had gone completely white during the war against the Void Swarm, but his eyes still held the spark of curiosity that had saved the galaxy. The ships weren't building weapons this time. They were creating something far more ambitious, a stellar kindling array that could ignite new stars in empty space, bringing light to systems left dark by ancient cosmic disasters. The first test is ready, Doctor, announced Engineer Nam Gil, whose family had fled the burning systems years ago. He now supervised the construction of New Haven Station, humanity's largest deep space facility. We can create a stable star in the Proxima Void within the month. Parkman nodded, remembering when humanity had used stars as weapons. Now they were learning to birth new ones. Proceed with the test. It's time to show the galaxy that humans can kindle lights as well as extinguish them. The news of humanity's survival had spread throughout known space, carried by alien observers who had witnessed the impossible victory. The species that had fled to distant galaxies were returning, curious about the young race that had fought the unfightable enemy and won. Admiral Lee Hayen, now older and bearing the scars of command, decisions that had cost millions of lives, welcomed the first delegation of returning aliens to New Sol. The insectoid hive queens clicked their mandibles in respectful greeting, while the crystalline resonance chimed harmonious songs of admiration. Your species has changed the galaxy, transmitted the Kethter military commander through his translation device. Other civilizations are studying your methods. The concept of sacrificing the present to secure the future is spreading to worlds we never imagined. Lee accepted the praise with quiet dignity, but his thoughts remained with the 50 systems that had burned. Memorial walls throughout human space bore the names of those who had died in the Great Burning. People like Farmer Bei Su, Miner Kong Ho, Teacher Moon Da, and thousands of others who had voted for their own destruction to save humanity's future. The real victory wasn't military, Lee knew. It was philosophical. Other species were adopting human concepts that had once seemed alien to them. Democracy, sacrifice for future generations, and the radical idea that intelligence meant fighting impossible odds rather than running from them. Young pilot Yuhan, Admiral Lee's son, prepared for his first mission aboard the stellar kindling ship Dawn's Promise. His crew included refugees from the burned systems who had become the greatest generation of explorers in human history. Former miner Cha Young now led terraforming operations on empty worlds. Evacuation coordinator Shin A had established the refugee resettlement corps, helping displaced populations across the galaxy find new homes. The Proxima Void has been empty for 3 million years, Yuhan reported to his father. Ancient records suggest the star died there during the last Galactic War. We're going to light it again. The kindling process was delicate work, requiring precise manipulation of cosmic forces that humanity had learned to weaponize and was now learning to create. The Dawn's Promise positioned itself in the center of the dark void, where scattered hydrogen and cosmic dust drifted like the dreams of a dead star. Dr. Parkman monitored the process from New Sol. His equations now focused on creation instead of destruction. Initiate stellar ignition sequence, he commanded. The kindling array activated, concentrating cosmic energy and matter into a dense core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a new light began to shine in the darkness. Hydrogen atoms fused together in the ancient dance of stellar birth, creating warmth and light where only cold emptiness had existed for eons. Ignition successful, reported Yuhan with awe in his voice. We have a stable star. The Proxima system is alive again. Across the galaxy, alien civilizations watched humanity's achievement with wonder. The species that had burned their own worlds to stop an ancient evil was now creating new worlds and new possibilities. The Nexari revised their probability calculations to include something they called human factor variables, the tendency of humans to attempt impossible things and succeed through stubborn determination. The Luminari, somehow reformed from the scattered energy the void swarm had left behind, pulsed with grateful light. Your species has shown us that extinction is not always final, they transmitted to the Intergalactic Council. You fought for our memory when we could not fight for ourselves. On the memorial world of remembrance, built where the first stellar array had fired, children learned about the Great Burning through holographic displays that showed their grandparents' sacrifice. They studied the names on the memorial walls and listened to recorded messages from people like Teacher Moon Da and Farmer Bei Su. Why did they do it? Asked a young student visiting from Earth. Her teacher, a survivor of Haven's Rest Colony, smiled gently. Because they believed in tomorrow more than they feared today. They knew that someone had to light the darkness for all the children who would come after. The student looked up at the artificial star that now warmed remembrance, one of dozens that humanity had kindled in the years since the war. Will we have to make choices like that? I hope not, the teacher replied. But if you do, remember what they taught us. When all seems lost, we don't run into the darkness. We light it up and show everyone else the way forward. Above them, the new stars shone steadily, a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, someone willing to sacrifice everything could kindle hope for generations yet to come.